Great. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Luca, and I'm here to present you this joint work with Stjepan Picek, Domagoj Jakobovic, and Alberto Leporati about an evolutionary view on reversible shift-invariant transformations. So the story that I want to tell you about in this paper is about using genetic programming and to a lesser extent genetic algorithms to investigate the theoretical properties and the structure of a particular kind of shift-invariant transformations, which are reversible cellular automata in particular. So this is to go to the to the structure of our talk. I will first give an basic introduction about shift-invariant transformation and reversible cellular automata. Then we will focus on a particular class of reversible CA, and we will show how to turn this into an optimization problem which is suitable to be investigated with genetic algorithms and genetic programming. And then we will formulate some research questions that we investigated with genetic programming and genetic algorithms. Then we will show our experimental findings in the context of these three research questions. And finally, we will conclude the paper and give some possible future developments about this work. So let's start with the first section about shift-invariant transformation. So assume that you have a dynamical system, and the state of this dynamical system is described by an infinite string of zeros and ones, okay? So the shift operation just basically takes an input to this state of infinite zeros and ones and shifts all symbols in it one place to the left, as you can see in the picture here. And we say that a mapping from the set of infinite strings to itself is a shift invariance if it commutes with the shift operation. So basically, if we start by first shifting our state and then applying our map, we will get the same results as if we first apply our map F and then shift the output. Now, when we consider only not infinite strings, but a finite array of binary cells, then shift-invariant transformations actually corresponds to cellular automata. So what is a cellular automaton? We can see it as a finite line, as a finite array of n cells, where each cell can be in the state either 0 or 1. And each cell updates its state by applying a local rule of d variables to its neighborhood, which is defined also by this parameter omega, which basically tells you what is the offset of the neighborhood. So each cell apply in parallel this transformation, this local rule F, and the global dynamics of this cellular automaton is given by the subsequent iterative application of this global rule on all the cells of the states. Now, depending on the underlying local rule, we can have different kind of dynamics in our cellular automaton. One of the interesting dynamics is that of reversible cellular automata, where basically we can have our transition diagram of our CA disjoint in cycles, only in cycles. So we can reverse also back in time the dynamic of our cellular automata. And this is interesting for certain applications, for example, to design reversible computing circuits or for cryptography to implement encryption and decryption. Now, the problem is that reversible CA are hard to find and to characterize from a mathematical point of view, and we know only a few classes of them. So the idea here is to focus in particular on those local rules that induce a reversible cellular automaton for all possible length n of the cellular array. One of the possible way to do this is to focus on the so-called marker cellular automaton, where the local rule is defined in this way. So a cell will flip its state if and only if in its surrounding neighborhood, it will see a particular pattern, so a particular configuration of the surrounding cells. And this has a simple algebraic description as the XOR of the central cell, whose state is being updated, with a generating function of the surrounding cells. And in particular, the support of these generating functions, so the set of vector which maps to 1, will tell you what is the set of markers of configuration that where the cell need to flip its state. So in this example, we have only 0, 1, which is a flipping landscape. Now, when one of these marker cellular automata rule can be reversible, one of the possibilities to focus on conserved landscape marker CA, where in particular we have the property that the local rule is defined such that if a cell is in a particular marker CA or flipping marker or flipping landscape, then it will still be in the same landscape even after applying the global rule to all the cells. So this means that we do not destroy the information that was embedded in the state, and we can reverse by construction the dynamic of the cellular automaton. So this is an example that I put in the slide of a particular conserved landscape rules. And we can check if a landscape rule is conserved by using this landscape tabulation procedure, where we go to see, we constructed the neighborhood landscapes, and then we go to check if these landscapes are incompatible with the landscape of the central cell. If it is this case, then this, the rule would give rise to a cellular automaton which is reversible. So now the question is, how do we turn the search of conserved landscape cellular automata in an optimization problem? So let's move to the second part of our talk. And well, we all know that when we use meta-heuristics such as genetic algorithms or genetic programming, we first need to define a genotype encoding for our candidate solution. So first of all, what is the phenotype in our case? The phenotype will be the set of markers of configuration in the generating function of our marker cellular automaton. And since these are defined by the support of the generating function G, then we can basically limit ourselves, for the case of genetic algorithms, to encode our candidate solution just by using the bit strings that corresponds to the output column of the truth table of the generating function. So in this example, we have this column here where we only have 2 ones. So this means that when we go to do the decoding from the genotype to the phenotype, we will go to see what is the position of the ones in the truth table of the generating function, and then we will convert these the positions from decimal to binary notation in order to get the flipping landscape. Now, for genetic programming, we need to do an additional step because, as you all know, genetic programming manipulates syntactic trees. So in this case, we chose to use Boolean trees where the libs are the input variables of the generating function. So in this case, x1, x2, and x3, while the internal nodes are the Boolean operators, such as, for example, XOR and NOT, as in this example. Then we give all possible combinations of input to our to our decisional variables x1, x2, and x3, and we synthesize the truth table from the tree. And then we are still in the same case as for genetic algorithms for getting the phenotype of the candidate solutions. For the fitness function, we addressed 2 particular optimization objectives. The first one is about exactly the reversibility property of these cellular automata rules. So since we said that by using the landscape tabulation procedure, we can go to check if a rule is of the conserved landscape type by basically counting, by controlling that there are no compatible landscape with the central cell, then we just count them. We count the number of compatible landscapes, and we try to minimize these for every possible landscape that is in the support of the generating function G. So the fitness function just loop over all the possible landscapes and count the number of compatible neighborhood landscape with the central cells. And an optimal solution in this case will be a solution of fitness 0, because it means that all neighborhood landscape will be incompatible. For the second fitness function, this is more about the applicability of this kind of rules. So we chose to maximize the Hamming weight of the generating function. What is the Hamming weight? Basically, if we go to see the truth table representation of the generating function, it amounts to count the number of ones in this bit string. So in this example, the Hamming weight will be 2. And this criterion is relevant, for example, in applications such as cryptography, because the higher the Hamming weight of the generating function, then the better will be the cryptographic properties of a cellular automaton used in a particular cipher system. So the second fitness function just counted the number of ones in the generating function, and we want to maximize this. Now, in order to set up our investigation with evolutionary algorithms, we first did some exhaustive search in order to formulate our research questions. So basically, we can exhaustively search the set of generating functions up to diameter 6, because this can be done in a reasonable time, let's say a reasonable amount of time. And what we observed, as you can see from this table in the slide, is that first, the number of conserved landscape rules is really, really small with respect to the number of all possible generating functions. So in this example here at the last row of the table, you see that there are 46 reversible rules, while we have against a total number of more than 4 billion generating functions. And also what we observe is that the number of possible Hamming weights that these reversible rules can have is really low with respect to the length of the truth table of the generating function. So this doesn't seem that they are really useful from the cryptographic point of view. So this observation prompted us to 3 research questions that then we subsequently investigated with genetic programming and genetic algorithms. The first one is, given that we have apparently a limited number of optimal solutions in our search space, does it mean that it is difficult for GA and GP to converge on this optimal set? Second research question is whether there exist conserved landscape rules of a larger diameter that cannot be exhaustively searched with a Hamming weight that is higher than just 3, like we observed before, and thus that they are more useful, for example, for cryptographic application. And third, related to the second question, the third research question is about if there is a relationship between the reversibility property of the marker cellular automata rules and its Hamming weight. Now we go to the experimental part. So this is just, I won't delve into the details of our experimental setting, since it is quite a standard setting that we already used in a previous work about genetic programming and genetic algorithms with Boolean function. But basically, we investigated the problem instances of the space of generating function with diameter from 7 to 13, which of course cannot be exhaustively searched in a reasonable amount of time. And we set the termination condition to 500,000 fitness evaluation, because we noticed that after that, no improvement in the fitness function was observed. And then we repeated for statistical significance each experiment for 30 independent trials. Now, the optimization approaches that we employed to investigate these 3 research questions are 3 in turn. And the first one is a single objective optimization approach, where we just address the optimization of the reversibility property. So the optimization of the fitness function fit1 using both genetic algorithms and genetic programming. Then we used genetic programming in using a multi-objective optimization setting in order to minimize both fitness function fit1, so the reversibility as before, and then to maximize the Hamming weight with fitness function fit2. And finally, a lexicographic optimization approach with genetic programming again, which first minimized only the reversibility. So basically, we wanted to first find a reversible local rule, and then we maximized its Hamming weight while retaining the reversibility property. So for the experimental findings that we have is that, well, first, for the single objective approach, we noticed that both genetic algorithms and genetic programming always converge to an optimal solution over all possible experimental runs and experimental runs that we considered. So this actually seems to indicate that it is not difficult for genetic algorithms and genetic programming to find an optimal solution in this particular combinatorial optimization problem. But if we look at the number of fitness evaluations that are depicted in this plot, we can see a more precise story. Actually, genetic programming, which is shaded in blue, in light blue here in this plot, it's actually far more efficient than genetic algorithms in converging to an optimal solution, because it only requires at most 1,000 iteration in order to find them. On the other hand, we notice that with genetic algorithm, the number of fitness evaluation required to converge actually scales exponentially with the diameter of the local rule. Then for the second approach, so for the multi-objective part, we used a multi-objective GP optimizer to approximate the Pareto fronts of the reversibility property, so fitness function fit1, which is on the x-axis on this box plot, on this plot, and then the Hamming weight versus the Hamming weight, which is the y-axis on this plot. So the main finding here, as you can see from the shape of this curve, is that actually the closer a cellular automaton rule is to be reversible, then the lower its Hamming weight must be. So this actually seems to answer the research question number 2 in negative, because the Hamming weight forcibly needs to be too low in order to be usable for cryptography. Finally, for the lexicographic GP optimization approach, we basically compared this lexicographic approach with all the others, so the single objective genetic algorithms and genetic programming and the multi-objective genetic programming. And we compared what is the coverage in terms of distinct solutions found by these optimizers, and also the highest Hamming weight reached, and also the number of distinct Hamming weights reached. So the main finding that you can see here from the table by looking at the bold, the numbers in bold, is that lexicographic GP is actually the ones achieving the best possible trade-off among the three considered criterion. So distinct solutions, maximum Hamming weight, and unique Hamming weight produced. Okay, so to conclude, basically summing up our research question, we concluded that for the first one, despite the fact that the size of the optimal solution set in this particular optimization problem is quite limited, is quite small, GA and GP are always able to converge to produce optimal solution with respect to the reversibility property, although genetic programming seems to me quite more interesting than genetic algorithms for this particular problem, because it converges much faster. Then for the second research question, we basically answered this in the negative, because it seems from our multi-objective part that there are no interesting rules that are both reversible and with a high Hamming weight that can be used for cryptographic applications, for example. And finally, the most interesting thing is about finding this relationship between the reversibility of a local rule and its Hamming weight that we discovered by plotting these Pareto fronts with the multi-objective genetic programming optimizer. So some future direction would be basically to first investigate this performance gap that we noticed between genetic algorithms and genetic programming, for example, by performing fitness landscape analysis. And one of the other possibility would also be to use maybe to apply runtime analysis to this particular problem, because it is highly structured. So maybe it is even possible to derive some kind of theoretical results about the convergence of genetic algorithms on this problem. Then consider also more complex rules, reversible rules. So not only those of the conserved landscape as we define in this talk, but also those with partially overlapping landscape, which could be more interesting to cryptography because they give rise to more complex dynamics. And finally, try to find a theoretical explanation to the trade-off that we observed between the reversibility and the Hamming weight of local rules. Okay, so this was my last slide, and thank you for your attention. So if you have any question, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Luca. So do we have any questions? I might start with a question.
Yes.
I might have missed it. When you showed that for the research question one that GP was better than a GA, why do you think that happens? Is it because the representation is different, or related to that might be the way the search space is explored and searched?
Yes, we think that it is actually related to the representation. Let's say that genetic programming actually has a more compact and smart way of representing the candidate solutions for this particular problem. So it manages to find more easily optimal solution than genetic algorithms. So the fact that they are represented using trees instead of bit strings, in this case, it helps. Also, maybe the fact that we set up actually a maximum depth to our Boolean trees in order to prevent bloat. So that was a practical reason, let's say, for our experiment. But we think also that the fact that we limited that also improved, let's say, the explorability of our genetic programming optimizer.
Okay. While we wait for some more questions that might
yes.
appear, I have another follow-up question to that. So you said that you limit the trees. Did you, when you limit the trees, did you make it fair, let's say, in comparison to the size of the genotype of the genetic algorithm?
Yes, approximately, in the sense that we use as a rule of thumb, the fact you limit the depth to the number of variables, of input variables inside the generating function. So there is a relation between what is the maximum depth that can be reached by the genetic programming trees and the size of the truth table, let's say.
Okay, so makes sense. Okay, so I think we can conclude. So thank you, Luca, for your talk.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you very much.
Thanks.
So Ting.